making new plants by saving the offcuts, prunings and pieces of other plants. How good is that? G'day, I'm Mark from Self-Sufficient Me, and this is episode 5 and the final episode in our 5-part series on seed saving. If you haven't seen the first 4 episodes, I encourage you to do so, as all these videos are related. Let's get into it. Now, cutting and grafting can be really simple, or it can be quite complicated to do and take a fair bit of expertise. I think for the average backyard grower, including myself, or backyard food grower, we don't want to get too complicated, especially in this video. So I'm going to keep it fairly simple and relevant to the end goal, which is to try to create more food plants from what we've already got growing. A cutting is when a selected piece of a plant or tree is removed to create another plant that's essentially a clone of the original. Cuttings can be placed into the ground or a container and nurtured to grow roots and then into the new plant. A cutting can also be used to graft onto an already established plant, usually young vigorous rootstock, to fast-track growth and to create a stronger plant. The main advantage of using cuttings and grafting is time to maturity. In other words, the tree or plant grows faster and bears fruit earlier. The reason why is due to circumventing the juvenile period. See, the fact is, many fruit trees take years, if not a decade or more, to reach maturity and then start producing fruit if you grow them from seed. But when using a cutting from an established mature tree, this cutting remains mature even though it's placed on immature or young rootstock. That way, the tree skips the juvenile period and all it needs to do is grow and establish, and once it does, it pretty well fruits soon after. Sometimes a grafted tree might even fruit in the first year. Let me just say that I know some of you are thinking, or probably thinking, how is cuttings and grafting relevant to seed saving? I mean, you can't obviously save a graft or a cutting, can you? Well, you sort of can. Like, this is a really interesting example. This is a dragon fruit cutting. You can see it's starting to grow some roots. This is about 6 months to 8 months old, and it's still pretty green, isn't it? It hasn't been in the ground or anything. And this is a classic example of just taking a cutting and then setting it aside and saving it for later until I get a trellis set up or a post where I can replant it or decide what I want to do. And down the back here we've got this magnificent mulberry tree that's starting to get new leaves and fruit. What are you doing all the way up there at the dragon fruit? You should have followed me down here. Now I've got to go get you. Come on people, keep up. Thanks for joining me. We're still in winter, but it's starting to bud here and fruit is starting to form. Mulberry trees are really easy to grow from cutting, so if I wanted to trim this back, which is a good time to trim it back in the cooler time of the year when it's pretty dormant, and then just as it's coming into spring is the time to take a cutting, put a bit of hormone powder on it. That's easy to find, just search it if you don't know what I'm talking about. Dip the end in some hormone powder, put it in a pot, maybe whack a little bit of a plastic, half a plastic bottle over the top to give it some humidity so it doesn't dry out too easily, and you just nurse it for a while and it will strike, get roots and start growing into a new tree. And because it's a cutting, it will fruit earlier and it will really grow fast too. I've got a white mulberry here that we bought. I'll turn it around. This one here is only 12 months old. We got it knee high as a small tiny little plant, and now look at it. It must be a good 5 meters or more. It's going to turn into a really good healthy mulberry tree. But yeah, they're pretty easy to strike yourself. I just didn't have a white mulberry, so I thought, look, I've just got to have one. We grew this olive tree the same way as I explained with the mulberry. Just took a pruning from one of the parent plants, which is both of these Helena olives we got from the nursery. Took the pruning about this time of year, just before it got into spring. And this plant's about 2.5 years old now, growing into a nice new olive tree. This is our grapevine. Grapes grow really easy from cuttings too. I've done a video on this particular grape, but we've also grown several grapevines from cuttings. Basically all I did was use some nice about 6 to 12 inch cuttings and bung them in a pot of potting mix, just left them sit out. I kept them well watered and they struck and grew into new plants. And here's a real favourite for the home grower. This is rosemary. You would have guessed it, I suppose. Snip off 6 inches of this, whack it into a pot with a little bit of hormone powder, keep it moist, and they will strike really easily. So if you wanted to grow, say, a rosemary hedge, just get one rosemary plant and then use the cuttings to strike a whole heap, and you've got yourself a free, big, long 50-metre hedge or whatever. Here's an apple tree that I'm growing as an experiment. This grew from seed from a fallen apple from our golden Dorset, which is growing over the other side there. Produces lovely apples. I left one apple rot on the ground. A few apple trees grew from seed without any trouble at all. Problem is, I'm not sure if this will be true to type. It may not be. Also, apple trees don't usually grow well in the subtropics, and you've got to get a special variety that's low chill. And this might be a throwback to a colder variety if it's been a hybrid and a crossbred. So if it is, I might be out of luck. But what I could do is use a cutting from one of our apple trees and graft it onto this rootstock here. So we'll see how it goes. If it does flower and starts to produce fruit, well then, you beauty. If it doesn't, I might try to graft on some apple cuttings onto that. What I probably won't do is graft any citrus trees, because we've got plenty anyway, and to be quite honest, it's fairly cheap to buy a grafted citrus tree from the nursery. Here's another example that I want to show you, just to clarify a few things, because not all rootstock is equal either. I mean, just because you grow something from seed like a lime, this is a kaffir lime, or a mandarin or an orange, doesn't mean that that root stock is going to be fantastic for grafting. Some are good, some aren't. And this is a great example. Here's a good kaffir lime that's growing well, and it's professionally done from the nursery, and it's already, you know, almost head height, and it's only probably 2 years old. But I'm going to show you another one that I've had for about 10 years. And here it is here. This is the same tree, a kaffir lime, except the rootstock, or whatever it was grafted onto, isn't allowing it to grow very well at all. It keeps on shooting from the base of the plant. The rootstock keeps wanting to take over this plant, grows big, long shoots, have to keep cutting them down. And although this tree is good 10 years old, it hasn't grown very much at all. It's cute, you know, and we still eat a lot of the leaves in Asian cuisine and cooking and all that, so it still serves a great purpose in our yard. But it's a good example that this one here was purchased from the markets, and it was a home job, and they used whatever rootstock, I don't know, whereas the one that I purchased from the nursery was professionally done, and even though that's much younger, it's growing a lot faster than this one. And finally, here are some general points and tips overall about seed saving, just to finish this final episode and series off. True to type. No matter what seed you are saving, for best results, save seed from plants that you know are true to type, or grow the same plant from seed as the parent. If you want to save seed, then initially buy plants or seeds that are known heirlooms and true to type. Testing seed viability. So you're not sure if the seed that you've saved is viable because it's a couple of years old and, oh, you know, seed usually only lasts 6 months. Well, you can test that by just putting a sample on some damp kitchen paper, letting them sit for a few days and seeing if they'll strike. That percentage of strike out of, say, 50 seeds or whatever you've sprinkled out can give you an idea of how likely the success rate will be if you plant them out into the garden. You can use some cotton wool or anything really, or even a jar with like an alfalfa type seed sprouting jar if you want to. Where to store? We generally keep our seeds in our study, in a filing cabinet. The temperature stays constant and it's a convenient place to keep them. Practicality of seed storage. You will read and hear that most seeds will only last about 6 months in normal home storage. And whilst this is true for some plants, I have found most of our seeds last much longer than that, even many years sometimes. Having said that, in practice, I usually save seed to be grown in the next season anyway, with subsequent new seeds replacing the older, unused stock. Seed soaking. Sometimes you can increase germination rates by soaking the seed before you sow them out. Soak them overnight in a container or a jar or just a glass of water, then plant them out. This softens the outer exterior of the seed, particularly larger seeds like peas and beans do well to soak first to increase your chances of getting them to strike. Seed saving clubs and seed trading. There are clubs and individuals that save seed to exchange, swap, sell or save for other purposes such as preserving species or varieties, to protect against extinction or even doomsday prepper reasons. Check online if you're interested, as you're bound to find like-minded people and seed-saving clubs in your local area. That's it. Our 5-part seed-saving tips series has come to an abrupt end. Oh, the tragedy. In this series, we categorized 5 different ways or groups to save seed and create new plants. They were: number 1, dry seed; number 2, wet seed; 3, fruit tree seed; 4 was tuber, rhizome, runner, bulb or sucker; and 5, cutting or graft. I hope you enjoyed this series. Initially, I was just going to make one big long video, but when I started to get into it, I realized how vast the subject was and decided to break it up into easy bite-sized chunks that we could all digest. Saving your own seed and regrowing food plants from your own stock is a rewarding and cost-effective way to grow for any backyard food gardener. If you've got any extra tips that you'd like to add, please whack them down in the comment section below. And also, don't forget to watch this whole series if this is the first video you're seeing. And also share this playlist, this seed saving 5-part series playlist. Spread it around like seeds in the wind, because that helps me out as well. Thanks a lot for watching. Bye for now.